The Jets open their 2022 season this weekend against Baltimore. What do they have to do to upset Lamar Jackson and company? Michael Nania of JetsXFactor.com joins me to discuss today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, September 7th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This show is free, and it's available on all platforms. That includes YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. You'll get notifications as new episodes are posted each day. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find this podcast. Today, our episode is brought to you by BriteCo Jewelry. BrightCo brings you comprehensive, fast, and affordable jewelry insurance for as low as $5 per month. Check out your special offer for Locked On listeners and get covered in under 2 minutes at bright.co/locked on. Again, that's bright.co/locked on. Well, the Jets open their 2022 regular season on Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. To help me break down the game, I'm joined today by Michael Nania of JetsXFactor.com. Let's jump to my discussion with Michael about Jets-Ravens Week 1. It's Week 1 of the 2022 season. The Jets will host the Baltimore Ravens Sunday in the Meadowlands. And joining me to discuss the game is our good friend, Michael Nania of JetsXFactor.com. Michael, thank you so much for stopping by today.
Thanks again for having me. So excited that the season's finally here.
It has been a very, very long off season. So before we get to talking about the game, what was your favorite off-season move the Jets made?
I think for me, the most exciting move had to be maybe not necessarily necessarily this move itself, but the moment that the Jets traded up to get Jermaine Johnson in the first round of the draft. I think that just cemented that first round as such a successful night that could really set the tone for the future of the franchise. So I think that move in particular was the most exciting in terms of in the moment how that felt for the franchise. But individually, I think my favorite move, I think when it's all said and done, the move we're going to look back on as the best value addition this offseason, I think it's going to be the Tyler Conklin signing. Just researching him more after the signing, watching his film, looking at his numbers, and just really digging into his game. I think he's an awesome fit for this offense and a really underrated player, especially for the contract they signed him at. So I think he's going to turn out to be tremendous value on that contract.
Now, I hate to use like the terms tight end 1 and tight end 2, because I think like he and CJ Uzomah were signed for different roles, but do you think he's going to be like the guy we view as the tight end for the Jets by the end of the season?
Yes, I do. And in terms of, who's getting more targets and getting the majority of the production in the passing game, I think it's pretty clearly going to be Conklin. And it's going to be tough for both of them to put up numbers that kind of justify the contract because there are only so many targets you can throw to the tight ends when they have so many other mouths to feed at wide receiver, even at running back. So I think Uzomah is going to be the guy who kind of has to take a back seat in terms of the production, but I think it's in the blocking game where Uzomah's going to justify that contract. And that's not to say Conklin can't block too. That's a big reason why I'm a fan of Conklin. I think his pass blocking is fantastic. His run blocking is solid. But for Uzomah, I think he's going to be the number 2 of this duo in terms of the targets and the receiving production. But if he can be a really solid inline blocker, he has great size, good length. So he has all the tools to be a really impactful blocker in this zone scheme. So if he can do that and pass protect well and just handle his overall duties as a blocker, and then in the passing game, make the most of the targets he does get, even if they are fairly limited. I think he can definitely still be a good addition on the contract he got and a great complement to Conklin as part of this tight end duo.
All right, last question about the tight ends before we get to the game. How devastated were you when the Jets cut Ryan Griffin?
Oh, the franchise was over at that point. I was just about done watching football at that point, but somehow I pulled myself up out of the dirt and I kept going.
I mean, you can leave if you just decided to give up the Jets after they cut Ryan Griffin. I could do this. I could do this preview myself if you feel that strongly about it.
Yeah, it's so good to be able to watch a Jets team that has some respectability at the tight end position for once.
For once is right. I think it's like Dustin Keller, like 11 years ago, was the last time they had.
Yeah.
I mean, they had that year with Safarian Jenkins. It was kind of okay, but yeah, it's interesting because the Jets' first opponent this weekend is a team that's not so great at receiver, but does have some quality tight ends in the Baltimore Ravens. But before we talk about that side of the ball, it's not clear who's going to start at quarterback for the Jets. The buzz is kind of that it might be Joe Flacco. So I'm going to leave it to you to give us some Flacco positivity because I was not a fan of bringing Flacco back. And I mean, I could see a scenario where he plays well, but that preseason game against the Giants did not raise confidence. So give us some Flacco positivity if you can. If you can't, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I'm probably on the more optimistic side
Right.
in terms of Flacco's ability as a backup for this team. And I think there are a few reasons. I think one of them is, and granted, this was a while ago, but you look back to his full season playing under Gary Kubiak in this similar offensive scheme for the Ravens. I believe it was 2015. It was one of the best seasons of his career in pretty much every category. So I think you look back to that inspires some confidence. I like the fact that over his 2 years with this team, that he's kept the ball fairly safe, only the 3 interceptions and the 9 touchdowns against that. And granted that might oversell him a little bit. He still lost all 5 of his starts and wasn't great overall. But I think anytime you can get a 9-3 touchdown interception ratio out of your backup, I think that's something that most teams in the league would sign up for. So I think, his experience in the scheme and his past success with it, his ability to keep the ball safe against a team that is a very aggressive defense that takes chances to create takeaways. I think his ability to keep the ball safe. I mean, hopefully the throw against the Giants isn't an indication of what's to come, but based on what he did the past couple of years, he did keep it fairly safe. So I think that will help them. And I also look back to his 2020 film, and he didn't get a lot of chances to show this last year in his limited opportunities. But in 2020, his deep ball was really nice in the few games that he played. You remember the bombs that he threw to Rashad Perriman and Denzel Mims, even Jameson Crowder in those games against the Patriots and Chargers. And I thought he still had a nice deep ball. And we have seen some examples of that in training camp this year. So I think, again, to go back to the Ravens and this defense being, aggressive, they have a lot of corners who take chances to make big plays like Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey. I think against this defense, for him to have that deep ball, if he could just hit one big shot in this game, that could really be something that kind of gets the Jets going. So I think there are a few reasons to be optimistic. The ceiling is definitely limited, I think, in comparison to Zach Wilson. But I think as long as Joe Flacco can, use his experience to execute this offense pretty fluidly and consistently and allow the playmakers to make plays, he should be able to give them a chance. But granted, his short appearance against the Giants in preseason, he wasn't encouraging. I think he was the worst part of the offense. I think the offense played pretty well. I think he kind of held them back. So it wasn't a great appearance, but he has been pretty good throughout training camp and the joint practices. So I think that's encouraging. So we'll see what he gives them. But I think as far as backup quarterbacks go, I think he's in the upper end of the league.
We will go with your take. I like your take better than my take. So we'll just go with that. I won't respond to it. We'll just plow forward. And of course, we hope Zach Wilson plays because, as you said, I do think Flacco, no matter what your views are of Flacco, he is a little limited. He's, he can't really move that much anymore. I mean, he threw that interception when he was on the move, which was just horrific. Zach Wilson does add a little bit of an element of, being able to move, extend plays, maybe make something happen down the field because he's extended to play. So, fingers crossed. Hopefully Zach Wilson plays this game.
Yeah, I think it would be a huge jolt of excitement. I think, you want to play it safe, but at the same time, I think you have to trust the judgment of the team and the medical staff, because all we get is, the title of the injury, the name of what it is, and an estimated timetable. But we don't know the exact, specifics of how severe it is, how his pain is, how he's recovering, all these things. So if, the team is confident that he is legitimately 100% ready to go, then he should be out there. And that's essentially what Robert Saleh said today, as of Tuesday. He said Zach had a second straight good day of working out, and if he's 100%, he's going to go. So we'll see what happens. I would be surprised, based on the fact that it does seem like it would be a little bit rushed, and Flacco has kind of been preparing for this for a few weeks now. So it would still surprise me, but it's these last couple of days, it does seem like it's become more likely. But I do think he would be a big ceiling raiser. And I guess the big thing that does push me towards Wilson in terms of the chances of winning this specific game against Baltimore is, I think the Jets are going to have to score a lot to win this game, because defensively it's not a great matchup. I don't really see them holding Baltimore to a low scoring total. Maybe they can hold them in check if their secondary can play well, but because of the matchup against this team, their run game against this Jets run defense, I think it's going to be hard to keep them to a really low scoring total. So I think they're going to have to put up points. And then we talked about Flacco, ceiling's limited. Zach Wilson gives them a higher ceiling, the ceiling that they might need to win what might be a shootout. So like you said, I think if Wilson could go, it would be a pretty big boost.
How do you think the Jets attack this Ravens off defense?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because, I think they want to be a run first team. I think we all know that's sort of not necessarily run first in terms of running it more than passing, but they really want to establish that run game. That's why you sign 2 tight ends, sign Lake and Thompson, trade up for Brees Hall. But at the same time, I think, if you're going to beat this Ravens team, you also have to be able to beat their man coverage and punish them for their, aggressive blitz packages with man coverage behind it. So you got to be willing to take some chances as well. So I think we're going to see them try to run the ball early. This team wasn't great at stopping the run last year. Granted, they had a lot of injuries, but they do have, I think, a good chance to run the football. And then hopefully if they can establish that, they can have a good play action game. Then maybe try to get some big plays against these corners, get Elijah Moore working vertically, and go for some of those big plays. I think we'll see them try to attack using the wide receivers. I think we'll try to see them attack for big plays, maybe more frequently than they will throughout the season, just because of the style of defense the Ravens play. I think you want to exploit their stylistic approach in terms of coverage. And I also think a key in this game will be the tight ends. Last year, Baltimore had a lot of trouble covering tight ends. And again, they were banged up last season, but a big part of that were 2 guys who are a big part of that are still starters for them. Linebacker Patrick Queen and safety Chuck Clark. Those 2 guys are still starters for them. They were pretty low rated coverage players last year, big part of the tight end issues. So I think Tyler Conklin, again, working off that play action, and we saw a little bit of it in the preseason, calling play action, just get him going on crossers, give him chances to be isolated against linebackers and safeties so he can use his route running ability, which is very solid. Get some of those in-breaking routes, which he's really good at setting up at the stem of his routes and beating those linebackers and safeties. I think he'll be a big part of it as well. So I think the Jets offense against the Ravens defense is a much better matchup than the opposite. So I think the Jets offense is going to have a pretty great game here to compensate for what might be a tough day for the defense.
I'll tell you what concerns me a little bit for the Jets on offense. And you mentioned it. Jets are probably going to be, I don't know if you want to phrase it a run first team, but the Jets want to run the ball this year. They want to establish the run. And I feel like on opening day, no matter who you're playing, you're going to go to your identity first. You're going to say, this is who we are. And I think about that game against the Giants, and I don't think the run blocking was very good. And I was not
Right.
expecting the run blocking to be very good. And I think it's going to be an issue early in the season just because the Jets are rolling out an offensive line that began playing together near the end of training camp. It's nobody's fault. Mekhi Becton got hurt. I think they had to go out and get somebody like a Dwayne Brown. I think they did the best that they could, but it's still going to take time for everybody to gel. So I feel like the run blocking may not be there for this game in the early stage. I think it could come together later in the season, but I think there could be some growing pains. And I worry, opening day, you want to show this is our new identity. We're going to pound the football. And I hope Mike LaFleur doesn't get caught in that trap.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And you think back to last year's season opener against the Panthers, and that was definitely, I feel like, one of the closest examples we saw throughout the season of them trying to play to that 49ers identity. And that's not to say it worked well, because it obviously didn't. But just in terms of how much 12 personnel they used, the play action, the outside zone reliance, things like that, they really came out and tried to do those things against the Panthers, and it didn't work well. Now they have better talent at tight end, at wide receiver, running back, at a few different positions. So hopefully it can work well if they try to do that. But like you said, I think the run blocking is a question, because it's something that, a few months ago, while Becton was healthy, you kind of hoped it would be a strength for this team this year. But he gets hurt. Now you have George Fant moving, you have Dwayne Brown coming in, and now there starts to be some questions, and they come out in this first preseason game, and the run blocking was pretty bad. There really wasn't anything there to work with, and the camaraderie is not there. They've only played that one game together as a unit, and granted, the two guys you're throwing in are veterans in Laken Tomlinson and Dwayne Brown, and they've played in this scheme or this style of offense before. So they should be able to get it going at some point, but it's still a question mark. And it might, like you said, take them some time before they really are gelled to the point to where this run game can reach its ceiling. So that could be an issue. And just like you said, I think Michael Fuller has to be willing to abandon the run if it's not working. And I know that's the opposite of what broadcasters always say in TV. They're like, don't abandon the run, stick with the run. But no, I think if your run game's not working, and you could tell that pretty early, just go to the passing game if that's working. So I think being open to uh, sort of moving away from the run game and trying to take some shots against a defense that will give you some opportunities to make big plays of your own, because they're trying to make big plays and take the ball away. That could be the way to go if the run game isn't clicking early.
We're in early September right now, and I'm trying to think. And I think your comment that the tight end talent is upgraded is the biggest understatement so far this year on Locked On Jets. I think that of course, for far too long, the Jets have been that team in the NFL. They've been near the bottom. They've been an easy victory. Hopefully that begins to change this year. And just like you don't want the Jets to be that team, you don't want to be that guy. And you certainly don't want it splattered all over the internet. And the guys at BriteCo Jewelry Insurance will make sure you get a replacement for the full value of your ring. If it's lost, if it's stolen, or you can't figure out what happened to it, or you're on a boat and it tips over while you're trying to propose, just go to brite.co/locked on. It's the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way to cover yourself with the best jewelry insurance in the business. These guys at BriteCo are geniuses. They have made buying insurance for your engagement ring, your watch, or whatever so easy that you can get covered in 2 minutes on your cell phone. You will not find a better deal on great coverage that's also super affordable. Brite.co/locked on. We all hate insurance, but these guys at BrightCo have turned the whole experience around, so it's probably the easiest thing you can do for yourself all week. You got no excuses. $5 a month, you can get totally comprehensive insurance, and it won't take more than 2 minutes on your phone. Check it out, bright.co/locked on, and check out the videos. They're hilarious. There's one proposal fail where a guy tips over the boat. You try and put together this fancy proposal. Sometimes it's better to keep it simple, but even if you can't keep it simple, BrightCo has you covered. See for yourself, bright.co/locked on. Now back to my discussion with Michael Nania on Week 1 Jets Ravens. Let's talk about the receiver position. You got a lot of different options here. It's not clear what the hierarchy is. I think Elijah Moore is going to be the go-to guy this year at the receiver position. I mean, it could be Corey Davis, could it be Garrett Wilson, and we can even throw Barrios in the mix. Do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I do think Elijah Moore is going to be that number one guy. He earned it with his play over those last 6 games last year, and then kind of backed it up this year with the way he performed in training camp. I think his despite his frame, he just has the ability to do so many different things well. Just run routes effectively at all three levels of the field. Has good hands, good yak guy. He's a really complete player. And then beyond that, I think like you said, you throw Braxton Berrios into that mix. I think he's going to be involved. Maybe not to a huge extent as a I mean maybe he will be involved as a pure slot receiver more than maybe I'm expecting or some people, but I think he'll definitely at the least be very involved as the jet motion guy, end arounds, screens, things like that, because he had so much success with it at the end of last year, and it's so important for this offense to have an established threat in that role that's really going to demand the respect of the defense, who's going to create that movement when he's put in motion, regardless of whether he gets the ball or not. Just the fact that you can have a guy who goes in motion and the defense is going to respect the possibility of him getting the ball and making a play with it. He's going to get them to move. He's going to get them to shift and create running lanes, and really opens up a lot of other things. So Barrios, I do certainly expect for him to have a role, especially early in the season. I think to start out, he might have a chance to have a similar number of snaps to Garrett Wilson, maybe more. And then as the season goes on, Wilson should have a chance to catch up to him and pass him as he makes more plays. But to start out, I think Barrios is going to be pretty involved and will continue to be throughout the year.
Now, the other side of the ball, and you mentioned it, and I agree with it, there are some tough matchups for the Jets on defense as they face this Baltimore offense. And, I look across this roster through the offseason. I mean, I think you name it, the Jets have improved in this area during the offseason. The one exception, though, is I don't know that the run defense has really gotten all that much better. I mean, Jordan Whitehead, I think, can help, but the biggest upgrade might be at safety. They really did not do much on the defensive front to make this run defense better.
For sure. I think the run defense is, for me, I think that's the biggest question on, I guess, outside of the development of the quarterback. I think the run defense is probably the most questionable part of this roster, because it was a weakness last year and there wasn't a ton that was done to fix it outside of the addition of Jordan Whitehead. And I think you could also say at corner with the addition of DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner, better last line of defense to stop those long runs from becoming, extremely long runs. I think you'll see an upgrade there, but up front, where it matters most, it's definitely still a weakness. Pretty much the majority of the defensive linemen on this roster are pass rushers first and run stoppers second. And then you just combine that with the way that this team likes to play, one gapping, penetration, and it's not really suited for run defense. And that's especially going to be tough this week against the Ravens, who are, gap blocking team, power running team. They're going to run traps on you, counters, option plays, all that stuff that is just built to really exploit this kind of aggressive defense. So run defense is a question going into the season for sure. And it's specifically going to be a question against gap teams like the Ravens are, and they're an elite team at doing that. So this is a rough matchup, and this is going to be a tough one for them to come out on top in their run defense against the Ravens run game. So that's something that the Ravens should be able to win pretty easily, and the Jets are going to have to find a way to mitigate that disadvantage.
Yeah. And, look, I like the fact that they're building this defense to stop the pass, because, I mean, for years I complained, why don't the Jets get any pass rushers in here? It's a passing league and we're built to stop the run. So, I mean, I can't complain too much overall. It's just this particular matchup is a tough one because you're going up against a team that runs the football so effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, I agree. I think it's good they're prioritizing the pass because, look, it is a passing league. Passing is more common. Passing is more valuable in terms of, the output that you get per play. on passing plays compared to run plays. So if you're going to be good at one or the other, you definitely want to be good at the pass. And we've seen so many Jets defenses in the mid 2010s kind of that were actually really, really good at stopping the run, but they just never had a pass rush. They could never really cover that effectively. And so their defense was never quite that great, even though their run defense was at times, the best in the league or top three. Even in 2019, I think they were number one or number two in terms of most run stopping metrics. But if you can't get after the quarterback, it doesn't go that far. Whereas if you flip that around and if you are top three at getting after the quarterback, but kind of struggle against the run, you could still be a really good defense. So I think it's good that they're prioritizing this, but you also want to still be able to do both, because if you're going to hit your ceiling and become an elite defense, it's not just going to be by doing one or the other. You have to be able to stop the run and stop the pass. So I do wonder about this defense's long-term potential of being able to be great at both things. But at the very least, it is good to know they have that very high ceiling in the passing game. But just like you said, as it pertains to this week, not only do you have a shaky run defense against a great run game, but it's a run game that's specifically built to exploit this kind of defense.
So here's my positive take. When the schedule came out, a lot of people said, oh God, Baltimore the first week, that's awful. I said it's good though, because Baltimore is a very unique team. And, the way things work out now, you get a bye week before the regular season begins. So if you have to come up with like a unique one game type game plan, I want it week one, because the Jets have had extra time to install it, and you can go back to, it's tough to install like a radically different game plan when you only have a regular amount of time to prepare, if you only have like a few days. But Jets have had some extra time. So maybe Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich can come up with something we're not expecting. Maybe they can alter their defense for 1 week. I mean, maybe they can come up with something.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good point, because you look across the league, the 32 teams, the Ravens have to be up there in terms of how I guess exotic they are, compared to just traditional ways of playing offense and defense. On both sides of the ball, they have, very particular styles of play. So for the Jets to have ample time to really prepare for that, I think is definitely an advantage in terms of, getting to play them now versus in the middle of the season. So that could be an edge for them. And then the other way, the Jets are an overhauled team with a lot of new faces, and there are questions on both sides of the ball that we still don't really know definitively how the Jets are going to do certain things. In terms of the linebacker rotation, Quincy Williams, Quan Alexander, how are those snaps going to be distributed? We don't know who's playing quarterback this week. We don't really know how the targets are going to be distributed between all of these new weapons that have been brought in. At cornerback, are the Jets going to stay strict left side, right side, as they did most of last year? Or is Sauce Gardner going to get to travel a little bit and do some pressing? There are still a lot of things we don't know about what the Jets are going to do this year. So I think in week one against a good team, it kind of helps for them to not have that information.
It's nice to finally have some Jets you can pick in fantasy football this year, whether you're playing in a season-long league or whether you're playing daily. I mean, if you're playing daily, you can pick Elijah Moore to go for over 100 yards. You can pick Breece Hall to go for over 100 yards. And using PrizePicks, you pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to $10 your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you against the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport you watch. That includes not only the NFL, it includes every sport. It includes the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, both men's and women's, soccer, esports, WNBA, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, Euro basketball, cricket, even disc golf. Disc golf. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. And there are safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit, match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. So that means if you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. And don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. I think one of the other challenges, we've been talking about the run game, but a challenge is that Baltimore's passing game really is not built through wide receivers, and the Jets, again, going to the trends, go out and get two corners, and that's going to pay big dividends for pretty much the rest of the season because most
Right.
passing games are built around the wide receiver. It's just their week one opponent happens to build things through a tight end, Mark Andrews. Baltimore doesn't really have good receivers, and I think the reason they don't have good receivers is because you're a premium receiver. You go to Baltimore, they're a running team, so you're not going to get many targets, and you have to block. And premium receivers don't like to block and they like to get targets. So Baltimore's kind of built this team a different way. And, Jets don't really have great cover guys at safety and linebacker. So, how do you deal with Andrews?
For sure. He's gonna be the big issue. And just as you said, like it's for most of the season, the Jets are gonna be happy to have an improved cornerback unit, but this is a team that, you know, focuses on its tight end more than anything else. And that was an issue for the Jets last year. And similar to the run defense, there wasn't much done to really improve the tight end coverage. Jordan Whitehead should help a decent amount, although he's still not an elite coverage guy or close to that. I'd say he's probably average, but linebacker, not a ton was done there. Maybe Quan Alexander could again help a little bit, but he was lingering around late in the offseason and signed to a cheap deal for a reason. So I think his coverage skills are still pretty good, but again, he's not, a superb upgrade in that area. So this could still be an issue for the Jets this year covering tight ends. So to in the season opener get the best receiving tight end in the league from last season is going to be a challenge. And I was doing some research earlier on Andrews, and I saw this one stat that he had the more than twice as many receiving yards on crossing routes than any other tight end in the league last year. 477. The second closest, second most was Kyle Pitts with 206. So those crossing routes are where he does a ton of damage. And that's the type of route that, isn't necessarily about can you cover him man to man. It's more about, can we play our zones effectively? Can we communicate, pass him off, match, and just be where we need to be to make sure that when he's crossing the field, which of course is often going to be coming off play action with this run heavy team, can we just make sure everyone's on the same page in that secondary and knowing where he is and denying those passing lanes? So that's a big part of covering him. I think it's as good as he is, it's a lot of what he does is just team defense, communication and zone versus, do you have a tight end stopper who can match up with him? Just considering his damage in those crossing routes. So the communication of the secondary, specifically the linebackers and safeties, is certainly going to be tested with Andrews on Sunday.
I have one last take, and this is kind of a positive thing for the Jets because we've talked about Jets defense really based around speed more than it is about power or brute force.
Right.
And I think like the temptation when you play Baltimore is because, they play so many big personnel groupings, lots of two tight ends, sometimes they'll play two backs. The temptation is to go big, but then like you end up in a situation where you got a big guy against Lamar Jackson in space. And I've seen through the years, like sometimes the teams that stop Baltimore are teams that go smaller. There was a game Lamar's rookie year against the Chargers where they put a bunch of extra safeties
Right,
on the
yeah.
field who could match up. So maybe the Jets style of play, as difficult as this matchup is in some areas, that's one stylistic area that might be good for the Jets. The fact that they do emphasize speed and maybe, of course, you could run yourself out of the play. We've seen Jets linebackers and safeties do that plenty through the years, but maybe they're a little bit better equipped to deal with Baltimore in that sense.
Yeah, immediately as you brought that up, I thought back to that Chargers game in his rookie year in the playoffs where they were, playing a lot of, I think they had like 4, 5, I forget what they were doing. They had an extra safety out there playing they had a lot of DBs on the field, and that speed really helped them stop that run game. So yeah, I think that can be an advantage for them because, this is a defensive front with a lot of speed, not a ton of power, so that could be beneficial. One thing that will be interesting though is John Franklin Myers is a guy who looks like they want to play in that hybrid role this year. Run downs, get him on the edge, get his size out there and his length, then passing downs, kick him back inside. But that might work against most teams where you want that size and that edge setting that he brings for you. If you're playing a more traditional rushing team, but against this team, do you really want John Franklin Myers out there on the edge where he might get isolated? Well, not might, probably will frequently get isolated, on these option plays against Lamar Jackson on the edge. I don't think you want that. So that's where I think it, goes back to Jeff Ulbrich and his coaching staff. Can they be creative this week and deviate a little bit from their core philosophies? Because I think in a lot of ways, if they just stick to their, bread and butter of what they want to be this year, it's going to get punished this week by this specific team. So I think there are some things that they're going to have to tweak a little bit away from their base philosophies if they want to match up better with this team. So Franklin Myers will be interesting to watch because, again, like I think it's a great idea that they want to play him in a hybrid role, maximize his size and edge setting in run situations, and then let him be the interior pass rusher that he is in passing situations. But that'll work against most teams. But this is a team that isolates the edge defenders, puts a lot of pressure on them to make decisions, to be able to contain the quarterback, and just get out in space and make plays. And I don't think you want 280, 290 pound Franco Myers doing that. So I think Jermaine Johnson's going to be huge in this game for that reason. I feel like he's going to play a lot of snaps in run situations, and he has the length and the speed and space to really handle those roles on the edge in the run game and make the plays that need to be made. So I think Johnson's going to be a key part of this game and in his NFL debut.
And I think it has to be said, we've been talking about Baltimore's key players on offense and defense, but they also have a pretty key special teamer. Guy who's the most automatic 3 points in football, Justin Tucker. And, you play against other teams. Sometimes they gift you some points because they don't, they mess up on special teams. I don't think you can count on Baltimore to mess up on special teams. They get in field goal range. They're getting at least 3 points.
Yeah, special teams is always something you got to mention with the Ravens. They've been one of the more, when your head coach is coming from a special teams background, you would assume that would be the case. And it has been. For years, they've consistently been an elite special teams unit in most facets. So it's something to monitor. And it's interesting with the Jets too, because a lot of the roster moves they made recently, I think they really do consider special teams fairly heavily with their bottom of the roster moves, like Denzel Mims, and with him falling down the depth chart, and other players who are released. They want guys who are good at special teams. At the bottom of the roster, they kept Justin Hardy, who's, special teams only, can't play any defense. So they do prioritize it. So it will be interesting to see how they match up against another team that is, the premier team in terms of, I think, maybe up there, the Patriots, one of the premier teams in terms of special teams. But Justin Tucker, yeah, for sure. We've seen MetLife kind of be maybe a relatively tough place to kick for some kickers. Jets got gifted a win last year by Randy Bullock, their former kicker from 2015. Justin Tucker is not going to do that. So special teams is where, you sometimes get gifted yards, gifted points by mistakes from the other team, or get bonus points of your own from returns or things like that. Ravens don't give you a lot of those free points and yards. So we'll see how the Jets and some of their special teams valuation at the bottom of this roster comes into play against a really good special teams group.
Okay. Last year I showed I have no feel for the Jets. I picked like practically every game wrong, so I'm not going to do predictions this year. Every time, like Tennessee and Cincinnati, I was like, oh, the Jets have no shot at winning this game. I picked them like every other week though. So instead of making a prediction, because we both want the Jets to win, and I don't want either of us have to pick against the Jets opening day. If the Jets win, who's the guy you're watching? Who needs to step up? Who needs to have a big game?
I think to go away from the obvious and say the quarterback, I'm going to look at Elijah Moore. I think, like I said earlier, I feel like if the Jets win this game, they're going to have to score, let's say, at least 25 points. I think even if the Jets play a really solid defensive game, considering the matchup, it'll probably at best hold them to 21, 24 points. So I think they're going to have to score to win. And if they're going to do that, it's going to be more so, assuming Joe Flacco plays, I think it's going to be more so the product of the weapons really winning on their routes, making plays with the ball. The weapons doing the bulk of the work more so than the quarterback. So I look at Elijah Moore against secondary that they're very experienced, accomplished, can make a lot of plays, but they'll also give a lot back. When you look at Marcus Peters coming off an ACL injury, almost 30, Marlon Humphrey to rough season last year, I think there will be plays to be made. And I think Elijah Moore is, if the Jets win this game, they're going to score a lot of points. And if they score a lot of points, I think it's going to be because of Elijah Moore.
I'm going with a former Raven, but not the one you're thinking about. Everybody's talking about the Joe Flacco revenge game. I'm going CJ Mosley because
Nice. Okay.
we keep talking about how Baltimore runs the football. And if you're going to shut down the run, I feel like your middle linebackers got to step up and have a big game. So, I mean, I think if the Jets are going to slow down this Baltimore offense, it's going to be CJ Mosley throwing up something crazy, like a 17 tackle kind of game, lots of run stops. Maybe once or twice he runs somebody down on the outside. I feel like for the Jets to slow this offense down, somebody's going to have to do something unexpected, and that's one of the reasons the NFL is so hard to pick, is you never know when you're going to run into a huge game from somebody. And CJ Mosley played pretty well. I mean, it wasn't great, it wasn't spectacular, it wasn't Baltimore level CJ Mosley, but maybe a little extra motivation opening day against his former team. I think if the Jets win, we're going to look back on this Sunday and say CJ Mosley was one of the MVPs.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick too. Because like you said, it's all going to be about this run game. And as much as we talk about the D line, the linebackers are always extremely important in the run game. So I think CJ Mosley, if he's on his game, can be a huge part of at least holding that run game in check.
All right, well, Michael, thank you again for joining me. I'm sure you'll be back again at some point during the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know. I'm looking forward to the season, and thanks for having me on.
That's all for our episode today. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. Big thank you to Michael Nania for joining me today. Big thank you to you for watching or listening, and a big thank you to subscribers to this podcast. And to join that group, just hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. You'll receive notifications as new episodes are posted. You'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give this show a 5-star review. It helps us out tremendously, as does giving this video a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.